All right, Garrett, I'm pumped to have this conversation, man. I've been looking forward to unpacking the book a little bit, but really, I read your book, Killing Sacred Cows, years ago, and then I've been being fed your ads, I think, for years online. So
Yeah.
I see your face all the time, and when you're doing as every book comes out, I would see a promotion, I would see something, and I'm like, he's still writing, he's still doing really cool stuff, talking about the Rockefellers, different. And so I've kind of seen your journey from afar, and then we got connected, and I finally got to connect with you a few weeks ago, and just nerd out and bro out about what's going on in your world, and you're multiple books deep, and I'm on book 2, and I'm catching up to your legacy. But I'm excited because this is sort of like half fanboy, half like I love to nerd out on personal finance stuff anyway. And then I loved your new book, Money Unmasked, and I know we were going to get into that today, but just wanted to say from the get-go, pumped to have you on the Graham Cochrane Show today, man.
Well, thanks for reading my stuff, man. It means a lot. I always enjoy that. Like when someone's like diving in, and maybe because I followed them around long enough on ads, they finally, submitted and grabbed it. But yeah, I really appreciate our last conversation. Look forward to having this one recorded. Basically.
Yeah, man. Well, I want to get into the new book, but I do want to start with Killing Sacred Cows, only because I feel like that's where a lot of people started to hear about you, and you really kind of came on the scene with some strong thoughts about money myths. And I'm a self-proclaimed personal finance nerd, and I know we'll get into money and business owners in a minute. But even when I was newly married, I was 22 years old, and I was like, I got to figure out this money stuff. I started reading Dave Ramsey books and David Bach, and then just Robert Kiyosaki. And then I started getting deeper and deeper, and then I read your book, and I was like, oh man, he's kind of like coming down on all the things I just learned, and really making me think about some things. And so we don't have to spend a ton of time on that book, but as someone who kind of came out with some cool contrarian thinking and some cool thoughts that like were provocative, which I think is great as a content creator in general. And I know it's all, you got to believe what you're putting out there, but why did you kind of come out the gate with these myths you wanted to debunk? Why that angle, and sort of maybe give the listener, the viewer, a little bit of context for kind of the way you got into this space?
I got into finance in June of 1998, and I mean, I just made mistakes right out the gate by the advice I was speaking out against in Killing Sacred Cows. And it wasn't just that advice harmed me because I had bought into these philosophies. I was now in the financial space telling other people about these philosophies that were including friends and family and the parents of my friends. And so when the year 2000 came and the market started to go down, my real education began. But I had to, as a young, arrogant kid, say, I don't know what I'm doing just because I was a good salesman, and have everybody move their money out of the market while I went and figured things out. And I just went on this path with the thought process. I don't care who's right, I just care what's right. And that includes myself. So if I have a belief that isn't accurate, I need to let it go and not be defensive about it. And if I am defensive, it's because it's probably a trigger because I've made a mistake and I just need to own up to it. So being willing to own up to those mistakes, and then just ferociously for 26 months, I was flying somewhere every month, interviewing the brightest minds I could, going to events I wasn't even qualified to be in, but I found a way in to really navigate what was happening. And so Killing Sacred Cows became a book that I was tired of hearing people say, I wish I would have known this 20 years ago. And first off, I was like 27 when I wrote that. So I'm like, well, 20 years ago, I was 7 years old, so I couldn't have helped you at all with this. So I just got really frustrated with that. And look, I was first thinking about writing Killing Sacred Cows because I thought this will make me seem cool and this will be good for marketing. And I pissed around for 2 years doing nothing with it because there wasn't a purpose to it. What really happened is my business partners died in a plane crash, and we had talked about doing a book together because these guys were with me in challenging the status quo and unbundling what was going on in finance. And we had this intellectual property partnership. And I remember the day that we just dissected 401ks, and it was like, I thought they were the best thing in the world. And if they were, by the way, if I had a 401k practice where I sold 401ks, as an advisor, you get paid on that every year, whether people make money or not. And you can sell that book of business for 12 to 15 times what your revenue is from it. So, so it's like, it would have been so easy and profitable. The problem is it isn't what it appears to be. So I was like, how are people going to figure this out when at that time no one else was talking about it? So that's where Killing Sacred Cows came from. And there's really three concepts that I thought were revolutionary. One is the first chapter, the finite pie, that
Yep.
if you're in scarcity, nothing else matters and you'll destroy wealth. Number two was avoid debt like the plague. And I said, nobody knows what debt actually is. It's misidentified. And number three, the myth of self-insurance. Most people have the most expensive insurance possible with their own dollars, and they don't insure the catastrophic. And then they do insure the inconsequential. So they're not actually transferring risk. They're just paying for inefficient money. And then the other three factors were high risk equals high return. It takes money to make money and you're in it for the long haul. I was saying that those are the three main tenets that confiscate wealth, but people believe and say far too often, and that's what the accumulation model is built on. So, dude, I can't believe I wrote that in my 20s. Like
it's wild.
When I read it, I was like, because sometimes I think I'm having these epiphanies, and it's still in Killing Sacred Cows. It's just me remembering some of these thoughts.
It's so wild. I think, yeah, what I love about that book, and a lot of that carries over into all of your other books too, is an abundance mindset versus scarcity. And what you just said is the goal really to accumulate wealth? Because there is a prescriptive way, or there's multiple ways, but there's like some dogmatic ways of how to accumulate wealth. But you're almost asking the question, is that really your goal to accumulate? Or is it your goal to become more of a producer, which is something that I love, and what I love about what we do on this show and with my students is trying to help people go from like my income is this because that's all I'm allowed to get paid because of my skill set, versus I can go create something of value in the marketplace. In our case, knowledge, commerce, and information products and communities and coaching, and turn that into income. And so, wow, it's like I'm actually producing wealth by adding something to, the society that's valuable, and that helps them create wealth or helps them achieve whatever they want to do. Like I started in music. I didn't help people make money, but I helped people make their music sound professional on a budget, which was part of their dream. And then they could go live their dream. And it's this abundance mindset. And I feel like that's at the core of what you talk about and write about. There is financial things, but really it's a very different way of looking at the purpose of money.
I feel like in the new book, Money Unmasked, the value index is the first time I've been able to put people in a place to feel what it's like to make a choice from abundance versus read writing about abundance. It's that kind of exercise of what happens when we add zeros to the end of numbers, and where our focus starts to change, and then going back and reverse engineering and saying, at what point did we flip to focus on others and not just ourselves? Where do we think about solving problems and serving others and adding value versus selfishly just taking what we can and holding on to it because we're afraid we don't have enough? And so, it is tough because a lot of us came from families that were blue collar workers, or from assembly lines, or from income uncertainty, and ultimately that can pass down like folklore to other generations. And I had to overcome that. I still have some remnants of it. It's not like I wrote the book and then I was just enlightened. I wrote the book and it was like, let's test you on this. Is this I was like, oh yeah, that's what that means. And I've developed some compassion over the years because of it too.
No, that's beautiful. I think, and we talked about this when we were on a call earlier, of like, you write the book that you need to read yourself, and you're kind of learning as you write, which I think is one of the greatest things. I feel like when I write something, I clarify my thoughts, and then I do have to go live it out. And I think I heard Matt Higgins, who wrote Burn the Boats. I feel like he just posted something like that online last week he's like, I wrote the book for me because I don't believe half the stuff I'm writing because I'm still struggling with it. So I wrote it so that I would be forced to read it and go like, yes, this is what I choose to believe and I want to believe. And he even tattooed it on his arm. So it's like it's an anchoring point. I want to get into the book, the new book, Money Unmasked, because in it you have these personas. You have the shadow personas, the winning personas. And I really felt like this was a very helpful way for people to discover who they are, and there's different ways of looking at money. And so maybe could you just unpack the shadow personas for example, because that's probably going to be like that's me. And I think that's really the heart of what you're getting at, is how do you view money and how do you view life? So maybe walk us through that.
Yeah, 4 shadow personas. The miser that plays a game called preservation. They typically end up with funds that they won't spend because they're addicted to holding on to what they've got. They're transactional in nature. They think about cost-cutting, elimination, deferring, delaying, reducing. It's kind of their mantra. I came from a family like this, putting cash in coffee cans, putting it in the cellar, knowing where the cheapest gas is, not buying something that they might want because they don't know if they're going to have enough money. And it's not really, they don't think about investments as often. The miser thinks a lot more about just cost cutting as their primary function.
Yeah.
The conservative, a fiscal conservative, not a political conservative, is someone playing a game called accumulation. And they end up with funds that they can't spend because they're afraid they're never going to have enough. And so they are worried more about diversified portfolios, and they are more worried about, investing money into retirement plans, usually at the expense of today. They delay gratification and enjoyment for far too long that it becomes almost habitual. And so that's the difference between a conservative and a miser. Conservative still will be mindful and want to cut expenses, but they will overemphasize the investing and diversifying, and they don't want to take risk, but they unintentionally do, because most of what they read about and learn about is very risky, but they think because they own more of it, somehow it's less risky. Meaning, if I have a mutual fund, that's got more than one stock, so I've diversified. Well, maybe not. What's the sector? Do you understand what the stocks are? Do you even know who the fund manager is? When will you benefit from it? What are the fees? How do you protect your downside? These are questions a lot of times they haven't asked because they love to read, but they read the books you talked about early on, like the Dave Ramsey books that are neglectful when it comes to the market, but emphasize for the miser what to do to budget, right? Yep. So both those personas play not to lose. Now let's flip to this other side of the scarcity coin called play to win. And play to win, it happens with a striver who plays a game called status. They think they can just work harder to make more money, but they inevitably burn out. And then, the striver, they love to show what they've accomplished, and they really want to accomplish it, right? They're willing to work for that. The high roller, they play a game called opportunity, and they're likely to end up and down and maybe even bankrupt because they take on too much risk. They're fine raising funds. They're fine taking pictures in front of a house that's not theirs, or renting, a car and pretending it's theirs. Like, I call that the financial dick pic. You have to be a dick to post pictures like that. You know what I'm saying? But that's kind of the high roller playing the game opportunity. So the difference between the striver and high roller is they both play to win, but the striver wants to earn it, where the high roller just wants to have it. They don't care whether it was earned or whether they inherited it or whether they, sometimes even cheated their way there for some of them. Not, this is just kind of the shadow side. And the shadow side usually happens when we focus from scarcity. It's in isolation and competition. It's in effort and struggle. And it usually is a very myopic view that doesn't add the most value to the world.
Yeah, I think hopefully everyone listening right now is like, ooh, I think I kind of know I'm this one or that one. And definitely there's going to be one side or the other that you're going to lean towards. When I read the book, and I went through your quiz, which we've got there, the Money Persona quiz. We'll put a link to that below, garrettgunderson.com/quiz. But I was the conservative. That's where my bent is. And so, I have some miser tendencies, but like accumulation, that's like, do I have enough? Like, if I just save more, then I can be sure, whatever my number is, just save a little bit more just in case, the market's not what it is. And so that's my bent. I don't like to take on a ton of risk, but I want to prepare for the future. It was very eye-opening because I could see how like there's something inherently maybe good about all four of those. I don't know if you would say that, but there's something like that I can see as noble that makes me want to save and take care of my family. But the shadow side is so apparent of like, but you might die in 3 years. Like, are you enjoying your life now? I mean, there's so many questions that come up for me, and I struggle with the enough question all the time. And I try to like hack my way to not be that. We've one of the easiest ways I've been able to do that is just dramatically increase our giving, like just give crazy amounts away that I have less to save, because it's forcing me to focus on other people and other causes that I really believe in. It's like, I know I don't need all that money. So let's just funnel it and do some good with it. But to maybe talk about like which one of those you resonate with. I think you maybe talked about the miser a little bit in your story because you've had a change, but you had some good examples of what that looked like even early in your marriage and then kind of where you've shifted now.
The first half of my life was miser. The second half has been striver. So, I mean, as far as that's where I've spent most of my time. I've had a very short stint as a conservative and a very short stint as a high roller, which my wife liked the least. I don't know. Miser was pretty tough because I was so ridiculous. Like I'd say, once we save up this money, then we can talk about having kids. And why we live in this crappy apartment, and I'd be fighting over why is the heating bill so much, and why are you buying stuff for your classroom because you're a teacher. And that kind of mindset was all about what can you hold on to, not what can you create. And once I recognized it was reductionist thinking, everything shifted. And it was like a shift in a moment when someone said, I wonder what it's like living in the financial prison you built for your wife. And I was like, okay. But then the striver kind of took over for a long time, writing a lot of books and building a business and speaking. And there was a large part of the early part of my career where my wife is raising our young kids and feeling like I'm never home. And so we definitely had, from like 2008, 2009, 2010, it was tough on our marriage. We didn't have a great marriage. It was mediocre. She was almost resigned to it. I wasn't emotionally available because I was so caught up in that striver game of more, bigger, better, faster, comparing myself to others. Why am I not further along? All that kind of stuff, and looking for that external validation of trophies and awards and recognition, but missing that internal benefit of family and self-love and enjoyment along the way. And I think almost all things around retirement, unfortunately, get us to think about a future at the expense of today. And when we think we have to sacrifice to succeed, we do things that aren't healthy for us along the way in order to appease everybody but ourselves, either in people pleasing or either in stuck in a losing game or in thinking a certain amount of money will make us feel more free. And this is where society is stuck in this race of frustration and strife and struggle is sacrifice. I don't believe that we have to sacrifice to be wealthy because wealth is a byproduct of life well lived. Instead, we have to embrace a design a game that we love, a game that's worth playing, a life that's worth living, a life that we don't want to retire from. And then we've already won the game and you just play the game. It's not the outcomes, it's the process along the way. But society gets us to focus too much on outcomes, and that's where misery exists.
Oh, yeah, it's so well said. My friend John Gordon says, if you love the process, you'll love what the process produces. And I'm very much focused on the outcome, and I'm like a recovering outcomeaholic. I'm trying to think about the process. You say something in the book, you say win, then play the game. That's kind of what you're alluding to. Can you unpack that a little bit? And maybe to the point of what is the balance? Like, we want to be responsible and think about retirement because we might live into our 60s and 70s, but we don't want to do that at the expense of the present. How do you think about that personally, and how would you counsel someone like me to think about that?
I don't use the word retirement. I use the word financial independence, and that frames it completely differently. Because retirement's something at age 55, 65, or something like that, and that you're working towards in the future. And what's unfortunate about it is most people neglect the very things that are important when you get to retirement in their preparation. So they're trying to build a nest egg, never creating cash flow with that nest egg. And now when they retire, they've got to create cash flow from that nest egg. So they're ill-prepared, ill-equipped because it's an improper methodology. So on the other hand, financial independence says, well, what if you have enough cash flow from either your main assets or your entrepreneurial assets, because a business could be that, right? And the three main ones are usually real estate, business, or intellectual property that people create cash flow with. Yes, you can get stocks that pay dividends and you can get treasuries that pay interest, but typically if you want to get there quicker, it comes from real estate, IP, or business. Not all three. If you try to do all of it, you're going to spread yourself thin, and that's where some people, take far too much risk because it's not aligned with their investor DNA. Your investor DNA is who you are as an investor. Invest in your skill set so you become a better investor versus taking risk. So if you think financial independence, have enough recurring revenue from your assets to cover your basic expenses, now you're financially independent. You have choice in the matter every day. You have freedom of choice, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, because that income's coming in. Now, it might require some maintenance and management. You might have to monitor it along the way. But even if you have to monitor it, you kind of have that freedom of you could take a week and it's not a big deal, or you could take a summer and it would still exist. And then just have mini retirements or mini trips along the way coming back into the world of value creation. My biggest concern about retirement is people retire from value creation, so they're no longer in charge of the outcome of their income. And I just find when people lose that purpose, it's not a fulfilling moment unless you worked in the assembly lines and in blue collar jobs that beat your body down, that aren't meant to do for 50 years. But what if you started to discover a career that's consistent with who you are, and maybe even invent it as an entrepreneur if it doesn't already exist? And if you have economic independence, you have the freedom to start doing that. So I believe in create economic independence as soon as possible, and then never retire. Just create the life you don't want to retire from and enjoy life along the way. That's my methodology and thought process.
Yeah, I love that. I remember a gentleman wrote into me about he was part of the FIRE movement. He was so excited to save up enough money for financial independence, retire early. If you don't follow that, and he was like, "I'm going to retire, at 40 or whatever, and I'm trying to save out this amount of money to then live off of the income, and then I can do whatever I want." And I was like, "Well," but he's following my stuff and building an online business. I'm like, "You're kind of already like building an asset right now that if it printed $6,000 a month for you recurring, which is very easy to do, or $10,000 a month, which this is what I help people do in just a few hours a week, isn't that the same as having a few $1 million spitting off 4% or whatever the 4% rule is? Like, why do you have to wait to have this a bunch of money that, to your point, is probably not even guaranteed? It's risky, but you're going to go build that business anyway once you retire. Why not just build the business now and benefit from it?" Do you find people get stuck in that trap of like misunderstanding the point of like, once I have this, then I'll do this, and we're doing things out of order? I find that sometimes we're doing the right things in the wrong order at the wrong time. Does that resonate with you?
Well, I feel like the FIRE movement, first off, what I do like about it is the minimalism thinking, that we're not our stuff and not getting so caught up in consumerism that it overtakes our life. I like that. What I dislike is it minimizes value creation.
Hey, friend, we'll get back to the episode in just a moment. Real quick, I hope you're enjoying the episode. And if so, please share it with somebody that needs to hear this episode today. It would mean so much to me. Also, I want to give you a gift for hanging out with me today. I want to give you my free $1 million life-giving business formula on-demand training. Inside of this less than 60-minute training, it will help you uncover your uniqueness to build a 7-figure boutique brand without burning out. This is some of my favorite material. These are the things that I'm taking my private clients through, but I want to share them with you in this free training. So if you've already built your business, but it's not giving you life, it's taking life from you, this is the training for you. It's absolutely free. Just go to grahamcochrane.com/lifegiving. That's grahamcochrane.com/lifegiving, all one word. And you can register for your spot right there. Now back to the episode. Yeah.
Okay, you're 45 years old. What if you live to 100 years old? You're going to spend more than half of your life in retirement with inflation attacking you, with taxes looming and being a concern, and interest rates fluctuating. So you're going to let an economy start dictating your life, because you're going to be even more beholden to it than if you own a business. See, in a business, economies change, and we just listen to our customers and we serve them during a time where they need more help. Like,
so good.
My businesses grew a lot in 2009 and in 2002 and in 2020 because people were more willing to listen about what we're talking about here. So if you could stop thinking about retirement from purpose, from value creation, or from vision, and think about retirement as something that you start eliminating the things that you hate doing along the way, and create a vision compelling enough for your life, and then enjoy life along the way, that's a new definition of retirement. And maybe that wasn't available back in the industrial age. That's the thing. Maybe we still have this like lingering belief system that came from a different time. But in a time of, transformation and technology and artificial intelligence, I think that it could make sense that we stay engaged. Like for me, what I love most about my business is I do these immersions one-on-one. I become friends with everyone. We get to a place of like real human connection because we're talking in a very vulnerable way. I'm finding out about what their obstacles and opportunities are, what their fears are, the things they've never shared with another person, helping them overcome that, live a better life, design a game they love and in life that they love. Like, why would I want to stop doing that? That's like so much fun. Now, if I was back in the days of peddling life insurance when I was early on in my career, meeting one-on-one, talking about insurance, I would want to retire from that. That's not what I love to do and who I am. So a lot of it is I think we just get stuck in this is what I have to do, this is what I'm good at, this is what I know, and it gets mundane and boring. So we're like, oh, how can we get to the other side of that? And that's why sacrifice is one of the main culprits of lowering people's wealth, is because we keep doing things we hate to do things we love one day, someday, when we might be too old to do them.
I love it. It's such a different way of thinking. It's so encouraging. I think it's discouraging for people that maybe aren't there yet, haven't figured out the business that they like, and they are stuck in something they don't like. But maybe my hope is that this conversation encourages them to make the pivot, to do what it takes to build a life and a business around the way they are designed and what they are good at. And there's a lot of things I'm not good at that could make a lot of money, or that I'm okay at, but I don't enjoy doing, and that could be a great business. I'm not going to do that. So I feel like now is the greatest time on the planet to be an entrepreneur, because there's so much more choice. You don't have to kind of play in certain lanes. I'll give an example. Like real estate for me, I've always been fascinated with, and we've owned some rental property, and I have a couple of properties, but I'm not really a real estate investor. And I've always understood the mechanics, read a ton about it, liked it in theory, but I can never just get myself to want to analyze deals, analyze properties, like nerd out. I'm realizing I don't think it's my thing. And I think I can make a lot more money when I get a little creative about my business and some offers I want to create and some content and writing new books. And like you said, IP, and that's a little more effortless for me. And I could do that. I could lose 12 hours in a day if I wanted to, just creating, and it's not exhausting to me. So I feel like there's some freedom there if you just kind of own your lane.
Well, I'd love to talk to you about something I haven't written about yet. Well, I guess I wrote a blog about it. So I have a blog, but I think it just aligns with what you're saying here. So there's the old way of thinking, what I would call the old portfolio. Okay, and the old portfolio starts with, we just put our money in banks, and they say things like, oh, you should have 3 to 6 months of savings. Graham, that's an insane thought. 3 or 6 months. That's 100%. That's 100% different. Like, it just shows that people aren't being paid to get people to get liquidity, so they have less thinking about it. I believe we want to have years of liquidity ultimately, because it gives us a lot of freedom of choice, and also lets us capitalize on opportunities when they come, because we have enough cash set aside. But we don't probably want to sit in the banks. Old portfolio says you're going to earn a little bit of interest at the bank. Then it says, you know what? In the center of this is the portfolio thought process. And the portfolio thought process for most people is asset allocation from 3 major assets: stocks, bonds, and REITs, like real estate investment trusts. But none of it's stuff that you touch or that you know about. It's always reliant upon someone outside. So really the tenets of that, of the stocks, bonds, and REITs are, it takes money to make money. So it's always about how much money you put away. High risk equals high return. So they're telling you to take risk in order to get return. Even though you're asset allocating to minimize some of the risk, still you got to be heavy in stocks, and so people get further away from control of their money, and they have a lot of fear around it. And then you're in it for the long haul. So they just wait for long periods of time as they funnel money in here without creating cash flow. Now, what they're also told with this is a little bit more of my what would the Rockefellers do stuff with the Rockefeller method is, hey, look, Graham, you know what? Insurance is expensive, so buy term insurance, and then you're going to have enough money in the future that you could get rid of that term insurance. But Graham, then I promise you, you're going to have an attorney one day come in your life and say, you've really done a great job. Good job. You have millions of dollars you're going to tax when you die. And if you don't do anything about it, that's just going to go to the government. Would you like to address that tax issue? And most people go, yes. So even though the financial person said buy term, invest the difference in that portfolio, the attorney says buy an insurance policy that's permanent now when you're older and it's more expensive. That's the old portfolio, and that's the struggle. And there's a lot of lies in that struggle. Hey, you can live off 70% of your pre-retirement income. Really? Look at what happened the last 3 years. Inflation was monstrous, so that wasn't really good. And why would we plan to have less money in the future than we have today, right? Then if interest rates go down, so does our income. If taxes go up, so does our income. If inflation's worse than we think, we start losing our purchasing power. So that old portfolio is what most people think about. And that portfolio is mostly mutual funds and REITs and fund managers. And, there's $22 trillion inside of mutual funds throughout the world. That's massive. Yet there's minimal accountability. What's the actual fee structure? What's the performance? What are those fees costing you? What kind of trading's happening? How good are those trades? How are they doing against index funds? That's the problem. Let me tell you the new portfolio, because I think it speaks to who you are. Mm-hmm. Okay. Instead of using banks, I just use where banks put their money. Banks put a third of their reserves in high cash value insurance, but specific types of insurance that get tax advantages, have contractual guarantees, and you can access your money before 59 and a half. Then The new portfolio is you are the portfolio. You're the portfolio. So that portfolio is either intellectual property, real estate that you could touch and benefit from and walk to or drive to or see, and then businesses. And it's a more active portfolio. So instead of investing in other people's companies you know nothing about, you invest in your own company. And you invest in yourself to increase your skill sets in one of those three areas. So I have a cabin that I host my immersions at that provides, my business pays for the cabin's use. We love it as a family. I'm building a music studio at my other place that I bought.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Walking distance from there, up in the woods, right on the river. So the real estate that I have here, like I used to have 100+ properties. Now I just have real estate that I personally benefit from, that
Smart.
I know the areas, that I'm related to the areas, and I've done well because of that before I got spread too thin. Intellectual property. I've written 9 books. I have a 10th in a manuscript. I've got video courses. I'm filming new video courses. Like intellectual property. I've licensed intellectual property to financial advisors. So I look at my theatrical keynote, my comedy special. Those are all part of the assets of the new portfolio, right? Intellectual property. So instead of thinking of stocks and bonds, you have insurance instead of bonds and savings. And then you have assets that you actually created that can create recurring revenue. And you learn how to market them, you learn how to add value with them, and then you don't have to go buy something in the future because you already have that death benefit that kind of came along for the ride, and you can use that cash to benefit. Like my book, Money Unmasked, was $350,000 to do all the design, do all the printing of the books, because I did a co-publisher, so I could do distribution through any Barnes and Noble, or I could do distribution through my own self and just keep all the margin above the book. So I decided to front all of it so I have more back end, because it's my investment and I look at it as a portfolio. So old portfolio versus new portfolio, it's a completely different methodology and mindset. And I think it also dispels retirement, because a new portfolio, design the portfolio you want, the game worth playing. Design it where you enjoy the work. And if you don't like writing books, don't write books. If you do, then write books. If you like filming courses, film courses. If you don't film courses. If you like doing, like I call that our intellectual property DNA. It's taken me years to figure out what that is for me. I used to do stuff because that's what everybody said I should do, not because of what I want to do. Now I do it because I love doing it, and it happens to benefit people as well.
I love this. No, this is great, man. This is my world, and I love this so much because, and we talked about this a little bit, but my new book, Rebel, Find Yourself by Not Following the Crowd, is really much about doing life and business your way and giving people permission. Like what you just shared is like giving people permission to do it differently if they want to. And I think so many more of us would do it differently if we saw someone else doing it or knew that we could, whatever that means. But we're either just reading what we read or see what we're seeing. But it sounds like to me that and this is what I believe to be true about entrepreneurship, and you probably would agree, there's a million ways to win the game and have a successful business. And when I look at people who say, this is kind of the stuff I push back against, people who say to be successful in business, you have to hustle and grind. At the very least at the beginning. And it's like, bro, I've never worked more than 32 hours a week in my life because my life just didn't allow me to do it with the season of life. And we were planning a church and I was volunteering here and I had a young family. And so I was like, if I was able to do it in 32 hours a week at the most, and then get it down to 5, and I realized, well, no one told me that was possible, but I experienced it twice. I'm like, okay, maybe I can set up my business the way I want to, and it's okay. And I feel like I'm on this mission to help other people say, well, this is the way I want to live my life, and this is the kind of business I want. And because when you mention real estate that you can touch and that you can use, this is how my wife and I have been thinking about it. We want to have a couple of retreat houses because she leads women and she's a speaker and she's an entrepreneur, and we want to do stuff together. And that you're talking about your cabin, that's literally what we want to do. And we're thinking, well, I would rather, instead of own multiple random rentals or random Airbnbs, I'd rather have this one beautiful house where we have these retreats where we get to go, we get to teach, we get to transform people's lives and couples' lives, and they get to benefit. Like that seems more creative and fun. And I feel like what you're sharing is just kind of giving people permission to create their new portfolio based around their interests, their skill sets, their opportunities, and what lights them up.
It's kind of interesting if we think about the process. Why do we not do that? Well, one, there's a lot of fear that people have to invest in themselves and to choose themselves versus just handing money over. And so if we go, well, I'm not as smart as someone that graduated from this Ivy League school, but we have to look at some of the people in money are not value creators, they're value extractors. They can tell a good story. We take risks, they get the return. They get fees whether we make money or not. They tell us to be in it for the long haul. They create cash flow along the way, right? Like they're playing by a different set of rules. And so maybe they could beat us on tests and on verbiage and sound really intelligent. But the question is, are they adding more money to our lives compared to the money we could add to our own lives if we invest in ourselves? And what I think is it takes more time to develop ourselves. It's going to be a longer path because, writing a book, there's money that goes into it. There's editors, there's all this, and then learning how to market it. Like, my book came out in 2008, but by 2010, that book had changed my life with the relationships I had built and the people that I had met and the way that we could connect. But it took longer than just putting my money in an account and seeing the money in the account. Yeah. I invested over $500,000 in Killing Sacred Cows, full page ads in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and cover of Publisher Weekly and hiring PR firms and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, that was hefty. It was a lot at that time in my life, and especially the timing of it being a recession that was coming on. But then I watch, and I'm not getting huge checks, but I think I got a $5,500 check off of the ebook sales for the last 90 days. Here we are, 15 years later.
Heck yeah.
And I'm still building relationships with people because of that book, and people are buying Money Unmasked because of that book. So sometimes it just takes longer for that momentum to happen. It isn't as immediate gratification financially, but it's more immediate gratification because we're doing work that's worth doing, and we're investing in ourselves. But we just have to overcome that fear, because here's what I'm going to tell you. You will make mistakes. It's part of the process. There will be times where it's difficult, but keep your vision bigger than your problems and you'll make it through. Be willing to ask for support, being willing to tell people what's actually going on, be willing to answer the tough questions, be willing to make course corrections over time. And you're going to find, yes, it requires a bigger investment of time than just handing your money over, but it's investments that will pay dividends long term because you become a better human. Like you said, you write your book and you learn while you're writing. I write my books and I experience the very things I write about at the deepest possible level. And I feel like the universe almost tests me on it. And it's like, oh, that's what that means. But now I have a way to connect with people. I mean, there's some people read my book. They know me so well before I've ever talked to them that it feels like we've known each other for years, right?
Yeah, I love it so much, man, because what you've done is taken the money space, which we've been conditioned to compartmentalize as an industry. There's like a financial industry when money is just a result of creating value in the marketplace, and it's a tool that we use, and you can't just compartmentalize it as this thing over here that either there's experts on or I got to be an expert on. It's really just it's much more messy than that and much more connected. But what you're describing, I think, is beautiful, which is, hey, we have this one life to live. We're uniquely designed and equipped by God to do things, to think certain ways, I like different things, and even my wife, we're very different people. So so you're unique. Why not live in that alignment, which is a lot easier than trying to be like somebody else, even if that's like to be like Garrett or be like Graham. And then why not be of service and go out in the world and add value, because you can monetize almost anything and you have something valuable. And then here you are leaving a legacy, which I know is important to you. Legacy is huge. And it's something you said about even why you wanted to write this most recent book for your sons. But it's like you're doing something for the world. You're creating, and what you described is you're creating all these pathways back to you. Like every book, every course, everything you put out is actually like a pathway back to you, which is opening up more doors for you that can turn into income down the road that might take. I just had John Rulin on the show, Giftology.
Love John, dude. John's such a good dude.
Great dude. And he's giving gifts to people. That's his whole, this whole strategic gift marketing thing.
My house is just filled with John Rulin things. I mean, I got to show you this that you're bringing up, John. Dude, my dad's a coal miner and my grandfathers were coal miners. So John contacted the coal mine and this is coal from my dad's coal mine.
Get out.
And it's a wine tool. And so I give it to everybody that does an immersion and say, remember all the hard work that got you here, but celebrate the wins along the way.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I mean, dude, the fact that he sourced and figured that out as we created something. Yeah. Anyway.
Isn't that wild? So John, I mean, John's a good example. Like he was saying, he's had a client that he just got that he gave a gift to or multiple gifts to 18 years ago. But like that's a long play of like 18 years ago. Now it's paying dividends. And what a beautiful way to live life, where it's like, how can I go out and create as much value as possible for as long as it takes, and trust that the income will come in, and not be so obsessed with this certain nest egg and a certain amount of money. I just love it.
Yeah. So, and look, just be around good people to support you, because it is tough to do these sometimes. It is tough to choose a path of, the new portfolio is what I call it versus the old portfolio. But that's why, I have a lot more liquidity with my cash values. I don't just go with 3 to 6 months. I have 2+ years of runway, so that, it gives me that chance to feel creative or take a break, because sometimes creations come in bursts, and, like in other times I might be out speaking, but, doing a comedy special or a theatrical keynote or Money Unmasked or a children's book that's coming out. That's all because I had space. It's all because I had the liquidity and the cash flow to do those types of things. And in times of my life where I don't have that burden of stress starts to crowd out that creativity, and abundance is a lot harder to create. But in those moments, it's just important to have good people in your life and let them know what's going on, so they can coach you through and support you through, and know that everyone goes through it at some point. It's just part of being alive. We have these lessons that I think we continue to learn at different layers, levels, and experiences through life. And sometimes those lessons are most profound when we go through them. We can learn some by reading, by example, but others we learn because we go through it. Like I write, in Money Unmasked, playing not to lose is a problem. And then I realize, wait, I was playing not to lose with Wealth Factory. So I sold that business and completely removed myself from a business that was doing $10 million of revenue. And then I started building, really, it became Wealth Factory in 2014, but it was the business I really started back in 2000, because it no longer represented who I was moving forward. And it allowed my creativity and artistry to come through and let them work on the details of finance and things like that.
I love that. I feel like that's a very freeing place to be, where you're able to be honest about what you want to work on, what you want to shut down. It's not the static thing. And I think you're one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is just selfishly, you seem a little bit like me in somewhat of you're like a Renaissance man. You're multi-gifted, multi-interested. You've referenced, you have a comedy special, which I think is incredible, because you're teaching people money, but you're using humor. You're interested in so many different things. And I feel like we need more people like you, to kind of give us a little bit of courage to say, oh man, if Garrett can do multiple different things and not have to pick this one little lane and be that forever, because some people can do that, but I've always been very interested in a lot of different things. And so it just fires me up. And I feel like there's a lot of alignment there. I know I want to represent or respect your time, but there's a segment that we always do in the show that I'm curious to hear your answer to, called the Golden Rule segment. It can go anywhere you want to go, more philosophical, but you've got kids. You and your wife are teaching them so much, and you're raising them the best way you possibly can. Let's imagine they forget everything that you ever taught them, except for one piece of advice that they actually would carry with them for the rest of their lives, something like a golden rule. What would you want that to be?
Know that you're of God, which means that we're all connected through that. So what you do to others, you're actually doing to yourself in so many ways. And just give yourself some grace and forgiveness as you make mistakes on this path, and and just value relationships over anything else.
I love it. Yeah, people are everything. So good. Yep. Garrett, this has been great. Everybody, the book is Money Unmasked. You can pick it up wherever books are sold. Go to garrettgunderson.com/quiz to check out the money persona quiz and figure out which of those shadow personas you are, and figure out how you can flip to the winning personas as well. There's so much more in the book to unpack. It's a wonderful book. All of your stuff has been great. I love the way you think. I'm grateful to have you on the show and connect with you, my friend. Keep doing what you're doing.
Excited for your next book, Rebel, because I feel like, it's also I'm saying you check the boxes of society, you're going to be unfulfilled, and you're saying yes, don't do that. Like, we're on parallel paths using different language, but very aligned. And so congratulations on keeping that moving forward from the first book to the second, and helping everybody out there, and look forward to more encounters with you, my friend.
Thanks, Garrett. Appreciate you, man.